Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Ladipo. I'm the National Programs Manager here at Actua. I run the current National Girls Program, and we're currently developing the National Black Youth in STEM program. This month is particularly exciting for me because it's Black History Month, which celebrates and honors the legacy of Black Canadians and their communities. As part of this celebration, Actua wanted to not only recognize the many contributions and achievements Black Canadians have made throughout our history to advance innovation in STEM, but we also really wanted to celebrate some of the women and that are currently breaking down barriers and paving the way for a new generation of Black innovators and leaders in STEM. And today I am joined by one of the wonderful ladies that we'll be talking to. Her name is Dr. Anna Ampaw, and she's going to be taking us through her organic chemistry journey, what it was like for her, and perhaps some of the barriers she faced. Hi, Dr. Anna, how are you?
Hi, Jennifer. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I just want to, you're a doctor.
Hey. I'm actually still getting used to it. Like, I have to remind myself that I'm a doctor, like it's Dr. Anna,
Don't worry, I'll remind you throughout the
Yes,
whole thing.
thank you.
So Anna, can you tell us a little bit about your own STEM journey in organic chemistry, how you knew that's what you wanted to do, and just some of the motivations that have taken you this far?
hmm So first of all, I actually didn't know that I would be here. Like, it's not like I went into undergrad thinking, oh, I want to be an organic chemist. I actually didn't even really know what organic chemistry was. And it's funny because like to this day, when I tell people that I specialize in organic chemistry, everyone's just like, ew, like why? Because it's the one subject that like if you're in science, everyone hated, like everyone tried to avoid. But going into undergrad, it was just something that I just was naturally good at. And it was weird because it just came easy to me. And even going through like high school and then undergrad chemistry just always clicked with me. And at first, I didn't really find it interesting just because you're always learning like the theory of chemistry, but not really how it's applicable. And then yes, you do labs in undergrad, but even still, it's just kind of like, okay, like why am I doing this? You know, it's not until you get into the graduate level and you have your own research project that it's relevant, you know, to society or relevant to the science world that you understand how organic chemistry comes into play in everyday life.
Right.
You know, so going into undergrad, I actually my mentality was I'm here because I want to become a dentist, and I just had this weird fascination with teeth, you know, where I just
Where did that come from?
I don't even know. I think it was my mom. My mom dropped it like because I remember in grade 12, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so she was giving me options. And so she was like, why don't you just become a dentist? Because I think when she was younger, she wanted to become a dentist, but it didn't really pan out. So it was just like, yeah, why don't you become a dentist? And then so I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, like, you know, dentists, they have a life, they make a lot
We
of
don't need
money.
them.
Yeah, they're always in demand, you know. I can enjoy my life, make money and whatever. And then so I just started obsessing about teeth, and like it's just something that I would always notice. Like if I looked at someone, the first thing I would notice is their teeth, and then try to think like, okay, like how can we make their smile better and stuff like that. And so I so I went into undergrad thinking that I was going to become a dentist, did everything I could, took all the courses, the prereqs, did the DAT pre-dental test, but I didn't get in after undergrad. So after that, I was kind of like, okay, well, like, what do I do now? So
All about the teeth.
I know, like, my life was all about teeth, and just like, what am I doing with my life now? So after undergrad, I couldn't even find a job in my field. And so I was talking to someone, and they were like, okay, well, why don't you just do a master's? And then that could better your chances to get into dental school. So it's like, okay, sure. So I did a master's in organic chemistry, simply because out of like everything that I learned in undergrad, that was the one course that actually resonated with me. And I was,
Organic chemistry.
yeah, and I found it interesting. I was good at it.
And okay, I think this is actually really interesting because we never really know the foundations or the in-depth things that make people like a certain thing. So what part of you, like what abstract, and I'm talking kind of like in an eclectic way, would you say
Mhm.
resonates with organic chemistry? Is it like is it the way you have to move things around? Like what part of it for you is, would you say would be fun that you'd be like, a kid could be like, you might find this fun if you think puzzles are fun or
Yeah,
something like that?
yeah, no, that was simply it because I'm a very visual person
Right,
and I love to problem solve,
right.
right? And so organic chemistry is a very visual subject because you're dealing with structures, how to make carbon-carbon bonds, how to do this reaction, pushing arrows, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, mechanisms, that's what
Yeah, the mechanisms and then even like the structural models and
yeah.
everything. And because I'm a very visual person, like I just found it so fascinating how something like carbon, which is all around us, like practically everything is made of carbon, but
Right.
it can take different forms, it can interact with different atoms and have a different geometry. Like it was just so fascinating to me.
I can
Um,
see that.
yeah, yeah. So as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a nerd.
That's fun. We all are at heart. There's something
Yeah,
everybody loves a lot.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it just resonated with me. And then I was also very into health. I love, just anything about health, how to improve our health and stuff like that. And so when I realized that I could link the two and I can use organic chemistry and you can make molecules and build molecules to form drugs or form inhibitors for different proteins and
Right.
just really make it applicable in health.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind and I just took it and I ran with it.
Wow, that is so cool. And I think that's
Yeah.
something I've never thought about. I think I should have made organic chem a little bit more fun. Like if I'd used more color pencils and made it a bit more
Yeah,
fun, I think perhaps.
exactly.
So you've obviously been through a lot in your journey. You're a doctor now. Can you give us some of the challenges that you faced, especially as a Black scientist in this field? I'm not sure if there are a lot of Black people that work in this field, but can you give us some of the challenges that you might have faced in that spectrum?
Yeah, I would say the major challenge that I faced, and I think it started when I started my master's. So I went to University of Ottawa for my undergrad, and then went to Dalhousie University for my master's. And then in that program, that's when I realized, like, oh shoot, I'm literally the only Black person in this whole program. Because during undergrad, like your classes are large, so you see other students that are Black and everything. And so that was fine. But getting into a higher level, like a higher degree, I looked around me and I was just like, I'm literally the only person that looks like me. So then it becomes that thing where you're in a room where no one looks like you. So you feel like you're out of place, and you feel like, and you start to question, like, okay, do I belong here? Am I supposed to be here? And so that's for me when the imposter syndrome started. And I think back then, I don't know if it was really talked about, imposter syndrome. I honestly just started hearing about imposter syndrome probably like 2 or 3 years ago. But during my master's, I wasn't in any of those circles that people were talking about it and how to deal with it. And so I found that I had a really hard time going through my master's and even the first couple of years of my PhD because I wasn't just battling, the stress of doing a master's and doing a PhD and trying to navigate through, that part of like my education where I didn't know anyone in that field too. So I couldn't even ask for advice or tips on how to do this, how to do that. I
And
literally
that's
had
so
to,
important in university, just having that conversation with people.
yeah, having conversation with people and having mentors is
Yes.
so important. But during that time, I didn't really see, it's not that I didn't see the value, it wasn't known to me, because again, like I wasn't in those circles. So I wasn't in the environments where anyone was talking about it. So having to navigate through that aspect and also having to deal with the imposter syndrome and continuously telling myself that like God has actually placed me here for a specific reason. That I think was probably the most challenging thing. And I mean, imposter syndrome for me, yes, I feel like it's gotten better, but it's still something that I deal with because again, as you go higher in education, you often find that it becomes lonelier and lonelier. Like you
Yeah.
don't see a lot of, especially being like a Black woman, you don't see a lot of people that look like you.
Right. And
Yeah.
when you are going through that kind of scenario, or when you feel that imposter syndrome, are there any tips or are there any tactics that you use to just kind of get through it? Because I totally understand that feeling, especially as an industrial engineer. They're not as many engineers that are Black in that particular field, and you have to kind of get through the feeling like on your own, and you get it, it's internal, and you have to do it like all in your head. So are there any tips, or is there anything that you did in particular to overcome that kind of feeling or that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I would say the one thing is acknowledging it because again, it was unknown to me, right? So I always felt this feeling, but I could never I never put a name to it because I didn't really know why I was feeling this way. Again, until people start to have those conversations, it's like, oh, I actually have imposter syndrome. So I think the one thing is like identifying it and
Mm,
then telling yourself that like for me, I knew because of the way my journey was that God specifically placed me in that in that room,
mm,
and that God specifically placed me to do my master's to my PhD. So that was my way of battling imposter syndrome, knowing that I was placed there for a specific reason, even though at that time I don't really know why. And I was still trying to fight, being where I am now and thinking that I was going to do something else with my life. But just knowing that you're there, and the reason why you're there is because you worked hard for it, and you belong there.
yeah.
I think that helps a lot.
And it's kind of like it felt like your purpose, right? Like this is what I'm
Exactly.
supposed to do.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
STEM industries have come a long way in promoting diversity and like inclusion just in the field. But what are
Mhm.
some barriers that you're still noticing, or some things that in your everyday, like your everyday work, that you notice that, oh, this is still might still be a barrier for somebody who is perhaps not as confident, or who has not come as far as you have?
So there's definitely still barriers. And I do acknowledge that, in the present day, we are trying to navigate through it and shine light upon it. And like, I really enjoy listening to those conversations of, people that are actually acknowledging that there are barriers. And even just, the fact that we have minority hires now, and the fact that, more STEM companies and industries are putting or are shining a light on this. I think it's a point in the right direction, But even amongst all of that, there are still a lot of barriers, I would say. And I would say one of them is probably just the fact that there's a lack of mentorship,
Right.
and also there's the gender race bias as well, which unfortunately, I mean, I feel like gender race bias will always be there, you know? But, and so those I think are the main barriers. But I feel that, for people like me or like you that are actually in those professions where we don't see a lot of people that are like us, actually taking it upon us to mentor the up and coming people would help a lot, just because like I wish that I had mentors and I saw, professors, or I had a TA that looked like me growing up that I could relate to, because I feel like that would build my confidence a lot more. So I think that, if you're in that position where you know that you may be the only one in the room, and then taking it upon yourself to help the next generation, I feel like that would definitely point us in the right direction.
Right. And
Mm.
speaking of the next generation, I wanted to talk a little bit about your actual work, about your work in organic chemistry, your research right now, and how, because it's Black History Month and we're talking about barriers and challenges, and you're really living it right now. You're living this paradigm. And I wanted to ask about like literally your work. What are you doing right now? What's your research about? And how do you hope it can perhaps in the future? I know you've talked about health a lot. How can it
Mhm.
further empower Black youth in STEM, or show them that, hey, this can be done and this is something new that I found?
Yeah, so my research is, I think it's very interesting. And so the one thing I like about my research is that, like, okay, so starting off in undergrad, if you go into science, you kind of have the mentality that I can only be a doctor, or I could be an optometrist, or I could be a veterinarian or a dentist, right? You only think of the professions, but no one actually thinks about how creative STEM is. STEM is such a creative field. You can literally do STEM and do whatever you want with it. Like engineers are so creative, technologists, super creative, scientists, creative, mathematicians, creative, and research itself is very creative because you're taking an idea based off of maybe something that has been done in the literature or something that you think could potentially be of use, and you're running with that idea.
Okay.
So just the fact that, you have that creative aspect to STEM, I just love it so much. But in terms of my specific research, so like I said, I'm an organic chemist. And what I'm doing right now is we're making molecules to help cure different diseases. So if you remember, like, yeah, so if you remember from organic chemistry, we always like worked with either the benzene structure, aromatic structure, the carbon chains, and all that kind of stuff. Um,
I'm sweating just
I
say I gave up when it came to the benzene rings and moving nitrogens. I'm like, leave me out of this.
know. I mean, a lot of people did, but I think that the fact that, it's not really taught how it's applicable, then
Okay.
everyone's just like, okay, but like, why am I learning this? Like, for what?
Why are we moving all these
I
all these
know.
nitrogens around?
Like, why is a carbon linked to a carbon? Like, how is that going to benefit my life? So I totally understand, but like I said, like, if you know how to apply it to just the everyday world, it gets very interesting. So like the drugs that we have on the market right now, like anything from aspirin to Tylenol to any type of drug, that was made in the lab. The first stage of that drug was an organic chemist like myself doing reactions, trying to see, can I make this carbon carbon linkage? Can I make this carbon oxygen bond to build this molecule that could potentially be a drug?
And your research right now is ongoing. You're actually working on making new molecules to cure like current diseases or diseases we don't know about or we know about or we don't have cures for yet, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yeah. So current diseases and different diseases that are known, but there's no cure for yet.
So can you tell me a little bit about the process for that? Do you just start
Mhm.
you do you have a basis in mind or do you just test and see how things work? Because science is it's never an exact science, right?
Mhm.
So I just want to hear a little bit about that and then this is so cool. And then I'll move
Yeah.
to our final and our last question.
Sure, yeah. So typically, I would say the drug discovery pipeline, which is what people call it, it always starts from a target, right? So say if someone has a disease, it's because of there's a malfunction in your body. So it's either maybe a protein isn't functioning correctly, you have a mutation in one of your genes, which can lead to, an inactive protein or an overactive protein. So what we can do is that if we have a protein that is malfunctioning and say it's overacting or it's being active but it's not supposed to be acting, we can make a molecule to inactivate that protein. And so that molecule would be called an inhibitor. And so essentially the molecule will bind to the protein and inactivate its function. And in the long run, therefore, it could be therapeutic and cure that disease.
Fine.
I know. But the thing is, it's like no one teaches you this in undergrad. Like they graze the surface of it, but no one actually teaches you how applicable organic chemistry is.
That is so cool. And I can see how it could get really creative because you'd have to try so many different things and see if it
Yeah.
works. But it
And
would be
it's
like
literally,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, it's literally like a puzzle because you have a protein, which is like one part of the puzzle, and you're trying to build a molecule that will fit into the protein. So another part of the puzzle. And then, so say if you get a molecule and it fits kind of like, it's not the best fit, but like it kind of fits, then you can try to modify that molecule so that it's like the perfect fit for the
Oh,
protein.
this is like the
Yeah.
coolest thing ever.
Yeah, right?
I didn't know that. I'm so excited when I learn something new while we're
Yeah.
talking. Wow, I've never thought about it like that, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't. And I think
Mhm.
that's what I really wanted to understand and get out of talking to you, Anna. Is there are those like there are those things in STEM, those fundamental things that you never really see until you're a lot higher, and then you're like, oh, it's
Exactly.
actually just a super cool puzzle. And like
Mhm.
I feel like as women in STEM, as Black professionals in STEM, and it's kind of our obligation to tell like the younger generation, hey, it's not actually what you think, it's like kind of the funnest thing ever.
Exactly.
It just seems like school at first because every school is always portrayed in a certain way, but I feel like if there was a lot more understanding on how cool and versatile a lot of this stuff in STEM is, there would be a lot more interest. So thank you so much for explaining it that way, for for that metaphor, I already have a
Mm.
book in my head right now, Anna. It's ridiculous. Okay, my last question for you, and I think it's one of the most important ones because it will be tangible, is what three pieces of advice would you give a young Black youth that's interested in organic chemistry, or that's just trying to find their way and that perhaps likes chemistry but they're unsure? What three pieces of advice would you give them based on all your experience over the years?
Yeah, I would say to not let any limitations define your pathway, because everyone looks at STEM and thinks that it's super difficult and very, very hard. And for me, like, I really don't claim to be the most intelligent person. Like, I can tell you for a fact, I'm actually not. And I think the reason why I made it this far was because I worked hard and I didn't let the difficulties stop me, because it's definitely going to be challenging. And what I always say is that no matter what, everything is challenging. Like, when you're a baby and you're learning to read, it's so challenging until you learn.
I always think
Yeah.
that in my head. I'm always thinking about babies walking. I'm like thinking
Exactly.
to walk. I'm like, think about how difficult what you're saying.
No, honestly. So it's like everything is always so difficult until you just
Yeah,
learn.
yeah,
So it's like you just need to put in that work and make an effort to learn, and then things will become easier.
yeah.
So it's like this whole perception of STEM being so like very difficult, being kind of like an untouchable field that no one wants to get into. If you're interested in STEM, like, do it 100%, because even the way our world is going, like, our world is going towards STEM. And I'm
Right.
not just saying that because I'm a scientist, but like, yeah, I know I may be a little biased,
Bye.
but like, but like, it really is. And like I said before, like, it's such a creative field where you can, even if you're interested in like spiders, you can take that and run with it.
Yeah,
You can,
rocks.
yeah, rocks. You can build a whole research group off of just studying rocks if that's your interest.
Yes.
I'm studying dirt, like
And there's
soil.
somebody there with money for you. They'll be like, come, I'll give you money to study.
Exactly. Yeah. Because like I said, STEM is a creative field. So we're adding to what's already out there,
Yes.
and there's something just about adding your knowledge to the world. And so I think that STEM is a really interesting field, and that if people have that interest in it, then go for it. Just like go for it 100%.
So go for it 100% and add your knowledge to the world, because I think that's really important. Like, just to remember that it's creative and you can add something new. Like, scientists
Mhm.
are always adding something new, and that's why it's iterative, or that's why it changes so often, because there's always
Yeah.
something new to add. So wow, thank you so much, Anna. I don't think I've ever thought of organic chemistry in such a creative way before, but it's
Mm.
essentially a super cool puzzle.
It is, exactly. Just think of it as a puzzle. That's all
Okay,
it is.
I'm gonna write a book about this. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Anna Ampaw, and
Oh,
have
thank
a
you.
wonderful day. Have a wonderful Black History Month. I'm so excited to share this with our network members and to share this with everyone, just to see that there are women and they're Black people right now making history, making new things, literally making new molecules. So I can't wait to see the new molecule you make. Okay.
Yes, don't worry. I'll
All
let you know eventually.
right. Awesome.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is such a great time.
Good one.
All right, you too. Bye.